A lone German fighter pilot circles a crippled American aircraft. He's already emptied his cannons. Now his machine guns. Over 200 bullets and shells have torn through the enemy plane. Still, impossibly, it flies. He pulls alongside, stares at the wreckage in disbelief, then does something extraordinary. He salutes and flies away. The year is 1943, and this moment marks the beginning of the end for German air superiority. Picture this. June 1943, somewhere over France. Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson sits trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet. His canopy won't open. Oil covers his windscreen. Blood runs from shrapnel wounds. The engine shakes violently. Through the blur, he sees a German fighter positioning for another attack run. What happens next will send shockwaves through both air forces and change the course of aerial warfare forever. But to understand why this matters, we need to rewind 8 months earlier. April 8, 1943. German ace Oberleutnant Ralph Hermiken watches through his crystal-clear canopy as massive American fighters lumber toward his formation. His laugh crackles through the radio to his wingman. The Americans have sent us flying milk bottles. Below, 16 P-47 Thunderbolts of the 4th Fighter Group struggle upward, their 7-ton weight fighting against gravity itself. To German pilots who'd faced sleek Spitfires and nimble Soviet fighters, these barrel-shaped American machines look almost comical. Greenhouse canopies. Wings too small for their massive bodies. Propellers that dwarf anything the Luftwaffe flies. The Germans are about to learn a lesson written in lead and fire. But here's what makes this story incredible. Within 18 months, these objects of mockery will become instruments of absolute terror. The laughter will die with the men who laughed. Let's fast forward to March 1945. Major Joseph Pips Priller, the same pilot who once called P-47s pregnant cows, sits across from German propaganda officials. They want him to boost morale. Instead, his statement is deemed too demoralizing for publication. The Thunderbolt is the best fighter bomber ever built. When you hear those guns, you know death has come calling. The sound haunts us. We laughed at them in 1943. We're not laughing now. What transformed a flying joke into a flying nightmare? The answer lies in a June 1940 panic. As German fighters sweep across France, Georgian-born designer Alexander Kartveli receives urgent specifications from the U.S. Army Air Corps. They want a high-altitude interceptor. What Kartveli designs instead redefines possible. It will be a dinosaur, he admits to his design team. But it will be a dinosaur with good proportions. The prototype that first flies in May 1941 shocks everyone. At 9,900 pounds empty, it weighs 65% more than its predecessor. Test pilots ask the same question. This thing actually flies? Not only does it fly, at altitude, it flies like nothing else exists. Here's where it gets interesting. The massive Pratt & Whitney engine produces 2,000 horsepower. But the real secret is the turbo supercharger. While German fighters gasp for air at 27,000 feet, the Thunderbolt maintains full power where the air is too thin for conventional engines. There's just one problem. It's killing more Americans in training than Germans in combat. Between September 1942 and January 1943, Major Hubert Zemke's 56th Fighter Group loses 18 pilots and 41 aircraft in training accidents. The P-47 ground loops on landing, torque rolls on takeoff, and dives with such enthusiasm that pilots discover compressibility, their controls freezing as shock waves form on wings. But those who master it discover something extraordinary. Lieutenant Robert Johnson, a farm boy from Oklahoma who'll become one of America's top aces with 27 victories, describes his first flight. It was like strapping yourself to a locomotive. The power was unbelievable. You didn't fly it, you aimed it. Now back to that first combat. April and May 1943. The P-47s can't turn with German fighters, can't climb with them, can't match their handling. The statistics confirm German confidence. First month of operations. 14 Thunderbolts lost for only 3 confirmed German kills. The RAF quietly suggests Americans might reconsider their choice of mount. British pilots joke that the best evasive maneuver in a P-47 is to unstrap and run around the roomy cockpit. But German intelligence is missing something critical. Remember those P-47s getting shot down? They're absorbing incredible punishment before falling. One aircraft returns from a May 4th mission with 21 cannon holes and over 100 machine gun strikes. Damage that would disintegrate a Messerschmitt or Spitfire. More significantly, when P-47s do get their guns on target, the results are catastrophic. 8 synchronized Browning machine guns. 3,400 rounds of ammunition. Combined rate of fire, 6,000 rounds per minute. Enough concentrated firepower to saw a Messerschmitt in half in less than 2 seconds. Now we return to that moment over France. June 26, 1943. Second Lieutenant Robert Johnson's formation is bounced by 16 Focke-Wulf 190s. Johnson's Thunderbolt, flying at the rear, catches crossfire from multiple attackers. 21 20mm cannon shells explode across his aircraft. The canopy shatters. Hydraulic fluid sprays everywhere. Fire erupts behind the instrument panel. Johnson tries to bail out. The canopy is jammed. A shell exploded in the track, welding it shut. He's trapped in a dying aircraft at 27,000 feet with no forward visibility, a barely functioning engine, and controls that respond only intermittently. Then it gets worse. A lone Focke-Wulf discovers the crippled Thunderbolt limping toward the channel at less than 170 miles per hour. The German pilot positions himself behind Johnson's aircraft and opens fire with 4 20mm cannons and 2 13mm machine guns. Johnson can only huddle behind his armor plate and pray. The Thunderbolt absorbs the entire cannon ammunition load. The German repositions and fires again. Still, it flies. He pulls alongside, staring in disbelief at the flying wreck. Johnson can see his face clearly. Young, blonde. His expression shifts from confidence to confusion to something approaching fear. The German empties his remaining machine gun ammunition into the Thunderbolt. Still, it flies. He pulls alongside again, shakes his head in apparent amazement, gives an informal salute, and peels away. Johnson's P-47 lands at Manston with its engine failing on the runway. The crew chief stops counting bullet holes after reaching 200. 3 of the 4 main structural beams are shot through. Yet the aircraft brought him home. The survival of Johnson's aircraft sends shockwaves through both air forces. American engineers realize they've underestimated their own creation. German intelligence initially refuses to believe the reports. No aircraft could absorb that much punishment. But testimony from multiple pilots confirms the impossible. By July 1943, American pilots are learning to exploit the P-47's true strengths. Lieutenant Colonel Hubert Zemke discovers the secret through brutal trial and error. Don't turn with them. Don't climb with them at low altitude. Use your weight. Use your power. Use your guns. The Thunderbolt's massive weight becomes a weapon. In a dive from 30,000 feet, it reaches 550 miles per hour, faster than any German fighter can achieve even vertically. This speed converts to altitude in a zoom climb that leaves pursuing fighters helplessly behind. Captain Walker Bud Mahurin develops what becomes known as boom and zoom tactics. P-47 formations climb to 30,000 feet, higher than German fighters can effectively operate. When targets appear below, the Thunderbolts roll inverted and dive, reaching speeds that make deflection shooting impossible. At the bottom of these dives, the 8 heavy machine guns speak. German pilots who survive describe it as facing a wall of lead. Aircraft caught in this convergence pattern don't just fall. They disintegrate. August 17, 1943. The deepest penetration into Germany attempted to date. Major David Schilling encounters a formation of Messerschmitt 110 destroyer aircraft positioning to attack B-17 bombers. Schilling's flight of 4 Thunderbolts rolls into their attack dive from 28,000 feet. Unteroffizier Heinrich Roth, a gunner in one of the 110s who survives, later recounts, "The American fighters came down like hammers from heaven. I opened fire at 800 meters. Good hits. The P-47 didn't even wobble. Then he fired. The aircraft ahead of us simply came apart. Not shot down. Destroyed. Wings separated from fuselage. Tail severed. Crew compartment shredded into metal confetti. In 2 seconds, a 110 became nothing. 8 Messerschmitt 110s are destroyed in less than a minute. Here's what makes this firepower revolutionary. At convergence distance, typically set at 300 yards, all 8 guns' ballistic paths intersect in a zone roughly 6 feet in diameter. Anything in that zone faces 100 half-inch projectiles per second, each traveling at 2,900 feet per second. The ammunition itself reveals American industrial capacity. While German fighters struggle with limited cannon ammunition, typically 120 to 200 rounds, American pilots can maintain fire for over half a minute. Lieutenant Colonel Francis Gabby Gabreski, who'll become the top American ace in Europe with 28 victories, describes the effect. When you hit them with all 8, they don't just go down, they explode. I saw a 109 literally cut in half, the tail falling one way, the nose and wings another. The pilot never knew what hit him. September 1943. The Luftwaffe discovers another horrifying reality. The P-47's performance improves dramatically with altitude while German fighters suffer. Oberleutnant Hans Philipp, one of Germany's most successful aces with 206 victories, encounters this reality fatally on October 8, 1943. Leading his squadron against a B-17 formation at 28,000 feet. Philipp finds his Focke-Wulf sluggish and unresponsive in the thin air. When P-47s of the 56th Fighter Group dive on his formation from 32,000 feet, the German fighters are sitting ducks. Robert Johnson, now an experienced combat pilot, spots Philipp's distinctive aircraft. His combat report is clinical. Opened fire at 300 yards, 30-degree deflection. Observed strikes along entire fuselage. Enemy aircraft exploded. No parachute observed. Philipp's death sends shockwaves through the Luftwaffe. If one of their best, a man who survived over 500 combat missions, can't survive against the Thunderbolts, what chance do average pilots have? The German High Command orders an immediate investigation. The report delivered to Reichsmarschall Hermann Göring in November 1943 is sobering. The Thunderbolt service ceiling exceeds 42,000 feet, higher than any German fighter can reach. Its dive speed approaches the sound barrier. Most disturbingly, its rugged construction allows it to absorb damage that would destroy 3 conventional fighters and still return home. January 1944. A new variant begins arriving in England that completes the transformation. The P-47D-22 features paddle blade propellers, 13 feet in diameter with broad chord blades that bite into air like massive oars. The improvement is immediate and dramatic. Where earlier Thunderbolts climbed at 2,200 feet per minute, the paddle blade variants achieve 3,000 feet per minute, matching or exceeding German fighters at most altitudes. Hauptmann Heinrich Knocker of Jägerschwader 11, a veteran with over 200 combat missions, encounters the new variants in February 1944. The fat American fighters have learned to climb. We bounced a formation near Hanover, expecting our usual advantage. They turned into us and climbed with us. Schmidt was caught and blown apart. Nothing left but smoke and fragments. These are not the same machines we laughed at last year. The paddle blade propeller does more than improve performance. It changes the sound. The distinctive thundering roar created by blade tips reaching supersonic speeds can be heard from miles away. German ground troops report being able to identify approaching P-47s by sound alone. They begin calling it Donnerschlag, thunderclap. By March 1944, P-47s equipped with external fuel tanks can escort bombers deep into Germany. The Luftwaffe's response is to concentrate on the bombers. But this requires flying through the P-47 escort screen, an increasingly suicidal proposition. Major Gerhard Barkhorn, one of Germany's top aces with 275 victories, mostly on the Eastern Front, survives an encounter with P-47s on March 6, 1944 that leaves him badly wounded. We saw them above us, fat silhouettes against the sun. Someone laughed and said, "Here come the flying pigs." Nobody was laughing 30 seconds later. They came down like an avalanche. The first pass destroyed 3 of our fighters. Just gone. Their guns didn't fire in bursts like ours. They poured out solid streams of fire. As more P-51 Mustangs arrive for long-range escort in spring 1944, P-47 units increasingly focus on ground attack. This transition will make them the most feared aircraft in the German arsenal. April 1944. The Allies prepare for the invasion of France. The Thunderbolt's heavy machine gun battery proves equally effective against ground targets. Armor-piercing incendiary ammunition can penetrate the top armor of most German vehicles. A 2-second burst puts 160 half-inch projectiles into a target area the size of a truck. But the addition of bombs and rockets transforms the P-47 into a true multi-role monster. The D-25 variant can carry two 1,000-pound bombs under the wings and a 500-pounder under the fuselage. Later variants add zero-length rocket stubs for 10 5-inch high-velocity aircraft rockets, each equivalent to a 105 mm artillery shell. Oberst Hans von Luck, commanding the 125th Panzer Grenadier Regiment during the Normandy campaign. They came in low, so low you could see the pilots' faces. The sound was terrifying. Engines roaring, rockets screaming. Then the hammer of those heavy machine guns. A column of our trucks simply ceased to exist. 20 vehicles transformed into burning wreckage in one pass. They called them J-bows, fighter bombers. But these were something beyond that. They were flying artillery with the accuracy of snipers. June 6, 1944. D-Day. Over 500 P-47s provide air cover for the invasion, creating an impenetrable umbrella over the beaches. German fighters attempting to reach the landing zones are massacred. Oberleutnant Wolfgang Fischer of Jagdgeschwader II, one of only 3 German pilots to reach the beaches that day. The sky belonged to the Americans. Thunderbolts were stacked from sea level to 30,000 feet. We tried to break through at dawn. 12 fighters from our group. I was the only one to return. The P-47s were waiting at every altitude. You couldn't climb over them, couldn't dive under them. Their guns turned our fighters into aluminum rain. In June alone, 9th Air Force Thunderbolts claim 651 locomotives, 3,847 trucks, 512 tanks and armored vehicles, and 4,553 horse-drawn vehicles destroyed. The Wehrmacht is forced to move only at night. Perhaps the ultimate vindication comes in encounters with German jet fighters. The Messerschmitt Me 262, with its 540 miles per hour top speed, should be untouchable by propeller-driven fighters. But Thunderbolt pilots discover they can catch jets in 2 situations: during takeoff and landing when jets are most vulnerable, and in high-speed dives from altitude. November 27, 1944. Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer of the 352nd Fighter Group becomes one of the first pilots to shoot down an Me-262 with a P-47. Diving from 28,000 feet, Meyer's Thunderbolt reaches speeds approaching 500 miles per hour, fast enough to catch the jet in level flight. Meyer's combat report: the enemy aircraft disintegrated under fire. Large pieces, including both engines, separated from the fuselage. The concentrated fire of 850 caliber guns proved more effective than we anticipated against jet aircraft. January 1, 1945. Operation Bodenplatte. The Luftwaffe's desperate attempt to destroy Allied air power. Nearly 900 German fighters launch surprise attacks on Allied airfields across Belgium and the Netherlands. At Y-34 airfield near Metz, home to the 365th Fighter Group's P-47s, the attack initially succeeds. German fighters destroy 22 Thunderbolts on the ground. A captured German pilot is brought to the command post, points at the burning aircraft, and taunts, "What do you think of that?" Major George Brooking's response becomes legendary throughout the 9th Air Force. He points to the flight line where ground crews are already pushing damaged aircraft aside. "By tomorrow, we'll have 40 new ones. How long will it take you to replace your pilots?" The German pilot's smirk disappears. Within 48 hours, factory-fresh P-47D-40s fill the flight line. The Luftwaffe loses 271 aircraft and 213 pilots in Bodenplatte, including many irreplaceable instructors and squadron leaders. The Americans lose 134 aircraft total across all attacked airfields. all replaced within a week. The numbers tell the story of inevitable defeat. Republic Aviation produces 15,683 P-47s during the war, more than any other American fighter. At peak production, the Farmingdale factory completes one Thunderbolt every hour around the clock. Each P-47D requires 65,000 individual parts, 8 miles of electrical wiring, 2,000 pounds of aluminum, and 300 pounds of rubber. Yet American workers, many of them women who'd never seen an aircraft before Pearl Harbor, assemble these complex machines with precision exceeding peacetime standards. The ammunition production is equally staggering. With hundreds of Thunderbolts flying daily missions, ammunition consumption exceeds 10 million rounds per month by mid-1944. Each cartridge is manufactured to tolerances measured in 10,000ths of an inch. Even more impressive than aircraft production is pilot training. By 1944, the United States graduates 30,000 pilots annually, more than Germany trained in the entire war. Each P-47 pilot receives a minimum of 400 hours of flight training before entering combat. German pilots are entering combat with less than 100 hours total time by war's end. Lieutenant Eugene Roberts, arriving in England in September 1944. I had 420 hours in my logbook, including 75 hours in the P-47. I'd fired at towed targets, practiced deflection shooting, studied gun camera film from actual combat. My first mission, I knew exactly what to do. The German pilot I faced couldn't have had half my experience. It wasn't even a fair fight. By April 1945, the Luftwaffe exists largely on paper. Fuel shortages ground most aircraft. Experienced pilots are dead or captured. But even with aircraft and fuel, German pilots face an impossible equation. Feldwebel Klaus Bretschneider, one of the last German pilots trained in 1945, flies exactly one combat mission before the war ends. His encounter with P-47s over Leipzig lasts 12 seconds. I saw them diving from above, for Thunderbolts in perfect formation. I tried to turn, but they were too fast. The leader fired from 500 meters. My aircraft shook like it was hit by sledgehammers. The engine exploded, the wing separated. I barely escaped. In the parachute, I watched them destroy my entire staffel. 6 fighters gone in under a minute. The psychological impact is complete. German pilots develop what medical officers call Jabo fever, physical symptoms of stress appearing when Thunderbolts are reported in the area. Veterans who faced Spitfires and Hurricanes without fear become physically ill before missions against P-47s. The final statistics defy comprehension. In Europe, 3,752 German aircraft destroyed in aerial combat. 3,315 aircraft destroyed on the ground. 86,000 railway cars destroyed. 9,000 locomotives destroyed. 6,000 armored fighting vehicles destroyed. 68,000 trucks destroyed. The 9th Air Force alone flies 213,873 combat sorties, drops 120,000 tons of bombs, fires 135 million rounds of ammunition, and launches 60,000 rockets. In 1985, at a reunion of German and American fighter pilots in Phoenix, Arizona, former adversaries meet in peace. General Lieutenant Adolf Galland, former head of the Luftwaffe fighter arm, is asked about the P-47. His response captures the complete transformation. We made a terrible mistake in 1943. We saw this big heavy fighter and laughed. The Americans don't understand air combat, we said. They built a bomber and called it a fighter. We were the ones who didn't understand. The Americans didn't try to build a European fighter. They built an American one, designed around production, firepower, and survivability. They understood that in a war of attrition, the plane that could take punishment and deliver devastating firepower would win. They were right. The first time I flew a captured P-47 after the war, I understood everything. The power was incredible. The cockpit was comfortable. The visibility excellent. The controls precise. It was a pilot's aircraft wrapped in armor. But what really impressed me was realizing that America built over 15,000 of these complex machines while fighting a two-ocean war. That's when I knew we never had a chance. Those guns. We called them Roosevelt's piano because of the sound they made. Once you heard that sound, you never forgot it. Many of my friends heard it for the last time. The P-47 didn't just defeat the Luftwaffe. It destroyed it. At the United States Air Force Museum in Dayton, Ohio, a restored P-47D sits among other legendary fighters. Below the display is a quote from an unnamed German pilot, taken from a 1945 interrogation report. "We laughed when we first saw them. Fat, ugly American fighters that couldn't turn, couldn't climb, couldn't fight. We stopped laughing when we realized they didn't need to turn or climb. They just pointed those guns at you and you ceased to exist." The laughter died with our comrades. The P-47 Thunderbolt entered combat as an object of derision and ended the war as an instrument of annihilation. In between, 8 synchronized Browning machine guns rewrote the rules of aerial warfare and buried the Luftwaffe under an avalanche of lead. German pilots laughed at the ungainly American fighter in April 1943. By May 1945, there were no German pilots left to laugh. The thunder had spoken, and the sky belonged to America.